The next thing we're going to talk about is danger. And our topic is how dangerous is law enforcement. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with, well, let's state the obvious. There are definitely dangers in law enforcement. The question is how dangerous and how do you really accurately portray that to people who aren't familiar with the field and who are considering this as a profession. So let's start with some statistics, for example. Let's go through the list of the top 10 most dangerous jobs in the United States. And we'll see where we are on that list. Number 10 is construction related. I think we can all understand where the dangers are there. Number 9 has to do with electrical workers. That's pretty clear with electric power. Number 8 is truck drivers and other commercial drivers. I think we can see the dangers there. Same with number 7, iron and steel workers. But how do those compare with our field? Number 6, farmers and ranchers. I don't know if we think of those jobs as being very dangerous, but of course with the machinery and whatnot, I guess we can understand why that is. But then again, how does that compare to our industry? Number 5, refuse, traffic, garbage collectors, and recyclable collectors. That one surprised me a little bit, but that's on there. Number 4 is roofers. I think that one's pretty clear, at least what's dangerous about that job. Number 3, aircraft pilots and flight engineers. That one, when I looked at that a little bit, because I didn't think that would be that dangerous, but what drives that one is the small airplanes that crash. It's not the big commercial crashes, it's the smaller ones. Number 2, fishermen and related jobs. I guess if we watch the TV show Deadliest Catch, we kind of know maybe that one would be on there. So what's the most dangerous job? Logging workers. And of course, what you see is law enforcement is not on this list. The research I did puts law enforcement anywhere from about number 16 to number 28, somewhere in that category. But definitely there are many jobs that are more dangerous than law enforcement statistically. So let's look a little deeper into that. Let's look at some summary data from the Department of Justice and the Census Bureau. And these numbers come from those sources in between 2008 and 2016. How dangerous is police work? Well, there are 809,000 police officers in the United States. So let's start with that basis. That would be licensed officers. 49,800 of those get assaulted. That's 6.1%. And that can be anything from a minor assault. I had a drunk person I was dealing with once kick me and push me into a wall. We called that an assault, but it really wasn't terribly serious. And of course, we know other assaults are far more serious than that. Of those 49,800, 14,565 are injured. So now that's 1.8% of law enforcement who get injured. 130, and this is taking a sample from 2015, 130 died while on duty. So that is 0.016% of the total officers of the 809,000. And that would be officers who died from all kinds of causes, whether they were shot and killed, murdered, or whether they had a medical condition and died while they were on duty. This is the total number who died while working. Of that 130, 56 of them are what we refer to as killed or feloniously killed, meaning they were attacked or assaulted and someone killed them intentionally. 56. So that is 0.0069% of the total officers in the country. Which means, and if you look at those last two bullet points there, what that means is you have a 1.6 1/100th of 1% chance of dying on duty, or another way to say that is 1 in 6,223. And you have a 6.91 thousandth of 1% chance of being killed, feloniously killed, while on duty, which is 1 in 14,446. Now, rather than talk about is law enforcement dangerous or isn't it dangerous, I think we should really focus on these numbers, and I think they say what they say. If that is too dangerous for your liking, or you're not willing to, put yourself in that situation, it's not the job for you. I look at this just personally. For me, my chances in my demographic of dying from heart disease or cancer are actually higher than these numbers. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't respect these dangers, or that I'm not aware of them. I'm very aware of them. And I think every day about the officers I work with and the concern I have about them being one of these statistics. And the officers feel the same way. We are very aware of danger, and we're very aware when an officer dies or is killed. But these numbers are basically, these represent the chance that that's going to happen. So I want to show you a picture. This is a picture from a police funeral. This is the funeral of Sergeant Joe Bergeron, who died in 2010. Sergeant Bergeron worked for the Maplewood Police Department in Maplewood, Minnesota, and he was killed on duty in 2010. And I chose this picture because I happen to be standing right in the front row of the officers you see there who are saluting. I'm probably the shorter guy you see in front there. And I remember vividly standing there watching as the funeral ended and Sergeant Bergeron was carried out of the cathedral, and the bishop was there, and the auxiliary bishop was there, and the priests, and the color guard, and the honor guard, and the family, and it was really, really impactful, really memorable to me. I can still picture it. So I thought, yeah, I'll put that up there because, again, whatever the chances may be, whether it's 1 in 6,000, 1 in 14,000, we as cops are painfully aware when these things happen. Maybe the difference is when the logger gets killed or something like the other numbers you saw, it doesn't necessarily get the amount of attention this does. And I think police deaths should get attention because, as they say, when someone attacks or kills a police officer, they're really attacking justice and the justice system and the society as a whole. So that is not insignificant to us as cops, and it certainly isn't to me. But the numbers are what they are. And I think if you look at those numbers, that might account for, if you remember earlier, we talked about when we surveyed the officers and we said, well, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much danger do you feel? And the numbers seemed low by some estimates. I think they know these numbers and these statistics and these chances, and that may account for some of that. Now, something that interesting that happened to me is I no sooner found that photo and I put it on this presentation, and just a couple days later I saw this article in the newspaper. The officer you see there, her name is Ashley Bergeron. She's the niece of Sergeant Joe Bergeron, whose funeral you saw in that picture. And Ashley was just sworn in as an officer at the Maplewood Police Department, the same department where her uncle died on duty. And I thought that was really interesting, so I contacted her and I said, tell me about what your thinking was and how you got to this point. And I said, can I use you as an example in this presentation when we talk about danger and how cops perceive danger? How do we view it? And her exact words were, you can use my story all you want, and anything I can do to help you kind of show what our profession is all about, I'd be happy to do that. So in that correspondence and in the newspaper article, what it really came down to was she is very well aware of the danger of law enforcement, to say the least. I mean, she was a young person and her uncle was killed. But she also knows some of the ideals that we work for, helping people in protection and those kind of things. And she just felt like she wanted to serve her community, and she felt that that risk was worth what she was doing in a bigger sense. And I really admired that. I thought that was great. So I wanted to point out that example. And Ashley Bergeron is one of many. There was an officer here when we were out looking at equipment who you may have met, and her father was an officer at our department. He wasn't killed on duty, but there are a lot of families where the sons and the daughters go into law enforcement over time, and they are well aware of the dangers and the downside and the hours and everything else. But I think generally they feel like it's worth taking that risk to do something important and something bigger. Okay, let's talk a little bit about danger some more, and now let's talk about force and encountering violence and police using force and in what context. So I'm going to make a sports analogy. The woman in this picture in the blue that you see there, her name is Helen Maroulis. She is an Olympic wrestler. She wrestles for the United States. And there is an article in Sports Illustrated recently where Helen reveals that she has suffered her whole life from fear and anxiety. So much so that she had a real hard time getting into sports or finding activities because she was afraid of people looking at her and afraid of failing and afraid of trying. And I think she even said in the article that she's afraid of the dark and she's afraid of being alone and she's afraid of crowds, and she just has that personality. But what she explained was she found a sport where she could work through that fear because all she had to do was what they were training her to do. And I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that was analogous to a lot of what we do in law enforcement, which is, Fran was up here talking about this stabbing incident, and the guy's in the house, and the cops need to go in there and deal with him, and they know he's armed. And that's scary, but they've also been trained, as I said earlier, in working as a team to deal with that situation. So Helen went through, in this article, she explains her progression in this sport, and she basically did what she was trained. And the more she did what she was trained, the more successful she was at her sport. And the more successful she was, the harder she trained and the more confidence that she got, and it just kind of progressed to the point where in this picture, what you're seeing here is she is in the gold medal match at the Rio Olympics. And the woman she's facing there in the red is a champion wrestler from Japan who is, at the point of this picture, a 3-time gold medalist in the Olympics and a 16-time world champion wrestler. And you'd think, geez, if someone has fear and anxiety their whole life and it's been kind of limiting for them, you think, how could they possibly be on a gold medal stage at the Olympics in Rio last year? Well, she was, and she actually won, and she's now a gold medalist. And training was her way of working through those fears and those anxieties. So there are a couple of quotes here, or a couple of ideas that I want to float by here. The difference between panic and reaction is training. So cops typically react to a situation. I think Fran talked about how the cops had to be right there ready to go with everything. Well, that's from Fran's view. From the cop's view, it's, well, I've been trained to react, so I know what to do, and then they just do it, rather than panic. Cops aren't more brave than everyone else. They are just more trained and more equipped. And I think that's really, I added aren't much more brave. I mean, cops need to be brave, but they don't need to be superhuman brave. They need to respond to training and be willing to work on that and work through it. Cops do need to be willing and able to grab onto people and to escalate force when necessary. So that's when this wrestling analogy is probably a pretty good one. If you just can't even stand the thought of actually grabbing onto somebody, you can't be a cop. There's a lot of things in criminal justice you can do. You could do some lab work. The FBI agent talked about support staff. There's a lot of things you could do. But if you're going to be a licensed cop with arrest powers, you need to be willing to grab onto people. However, you don't need to be a champion boxer. You don't need to be a ninja. You don't have to have a black belt. You don't have to be a power lifter. You don't even have to be a wrestler. You just have to be willing to grab on and then follow the training that we give you year after year after year. I say you don't have to be a wrestler, and I'm going to get a little bit off topic, unless you're this guy. This is Jerry. Jerry works for us in Champlin. Jerry actually was, in his youth, a professional wrestler. The other thing about Jerry, though, is Jerry actually came to law enforcement when he was in his 40s. So if you're watching this video and you're in some later stage in life, middle life, whatever it may be, and you're thinking about a career change and wondering if this is for you, Jerry's a great example of how you can come into law enforcement later in life and have a good career. Jerry actually just announced his retirement. I'm just going to read from an email he sent to the department when he announced he was retiring. He said, "It's been a pleasure to work with most of you over the last 14 plus years. This has been by far the best job I've ever had. I can't believe I got paid to have so much fun. Thank you all. Thanks for the memories. It's been a great time." So I thought that was pretty cool. And he's worked hard for 14 years. That's a fairly short career in law enforcement, but he made it work. Okay. As long as we're talking about use of force, let's look at some examples. Let's watch some videos. The first one is going to take me a minute to set up, and the reason for that is this is from our squad car system here in Champlin. And one of the things that's unique about the squad car video system is you can't tamper with the video imagery. So if you hear someone say, "Oh, the cops tampered with that video," it's not possible. This video cannot be reformatted. And because it can't be reformatted, I can't embed it into this PowerPoint system. I have to play it independently. So let me, I'm probably going to stop this a few times and tell you what happens as we're going. But to start off with, our officers get called to a domestic disturbance. A woman calls and says her estranged husband or boyfriend or whatever he is on his way back home. She's afraid he's going to assault her because he called and made some threats, and so she wants to be protected from this guy. She believes he's violent, or he may even have some history of that. The two officers just happens to be, we had two Champlin officers up here on the panel. Andy was the tall guy who had the bike, and Risto was the guy in the end who talked about just general patrol work. They were the two that were on this call. The video you're going to see is from Risto's squad car. So basically you're seeing the action as he saw it. So what happens is Risto pulls up in front of this woman's house to see if the guy has shown up yet. And he hasn't, and he's not there for long, and here comes the guy around the corner, and you can see what happens. His intention at this point is to detain this guy, talk to the woman some more, see if there's enough information to make an arrest. So he's basically doing an investigation, and he's intending to detain the guy till he's completed that investigation. And the guy doesn't exactly cooperate. The audio is not on until he gets out of his squad car and turns it on, but you can see the video image here. Okay, so obviously the guy's going to take off, right? He's not going to cooperate. All the way down to the commands he gives and the way he says that is part of the way we train. We not only train in use of force, we actually train on giving commands. So if you can't raise your voice and speak that directly with somebody, you can't be a cop. On the other hand, we will train you and help you develop that, because that's not natural for a lot of us. It takes a little practice, but most of us are able to get there. So the guy's backing away now and leaving, and let's see what happens. Okay, so one of the things we want to do and one of the things we train to do is not let this turn into a high-speed chase that goes on and on and on, because that becomes very dangerous. So every 3 years we go to training to basically learn how to spin this guy off the road, which is what Risto does here. He tries it once, doesn't quite get the right angle, comes around the other side and does it again before this really escalates. So he's now spun the guy off the road, and he's going to come around and box him in, and then you'll see what happens. Okay, so he boxes him in, and as soon as he does, Andy comes up behind him and boxes him in from the other side. So now the guy can't drive away. So he jumps out of the car and starts running. All right? And Andy is already getting out of his squad car behind the guy. And if you saw Andy, he's pretty tall. He can run fairly fast. It's a very short foot chase. And here's the real super complicated ninja black belt karate use of force move that Andy does. He runs up behind him and he tackles him. Okay, not real complicated, kind of human nature. Guy runs, you chase him. Catch up to him, you tackle him. What you're going to hear is the tackle happens fairly quickly, and then the officers are shouting commands at this guy to get him to comply, which he doesn't. And then you're going to hear kind of a tick-tick sound. That's the taser. Instead of rolling around the ground all day with him, they decide to use a taser on him. Okay, so at this point, they're no longer just detaining him to investigate. They're arresting him for fleeing. Fleeing the police in a motor vehicle is a crime, so they're arresting him for that crime. The yelling you hear is primarily this guy who doesn't like getting the taser used on him. Understandable. The other thing, I waited to this point to pause. You can see another squad car pulling up here. One of the things that happens is when the cops get on the radio and say, we got a guy who's fighting with us or a guy who's fleeing from us or whatever, basically every cop in the area is racing to that scene. Rarely do you find yourself as a cop in these situations alone. It can happen, but it's not the norm. The norm is everybody's coming until you get on the radio and say, I'm okay. Basically, that's it. You hear a little bit more yelling until they finally get him handcuffed and under control. You know, we picked this video for a couple reasons. One is it's fairly recent. It does involve two officers who happen to be involved in this project that we're doing today. And it's also not super terribly dramatic. I think you'd probably agree. You can go on YouTube and see a lot more violent, crazy, dramatic videos of use of force than this one. But this type of thing is much, much, much more common than a lot of those you'll see. And it also kind of illustrates the cops are generally pretty methodical in their thinking about their next move and what they're going to do. It's not just all happening crazy all at once. This is, you know, by Champlin standards, a pretty significant event and a pretty significant use of force. Not that we haven't had bigger ones. You know, you heard about one this afternoon, or this morning rather, in the earlier session, but you know, this is not an insignificant thing. And yet it was handled pretty well, and it was pretty methodical and not, you know, as dramatic as you might have imagined. Okay, let's watch another one. This is from Texas. This one's on YouTube, actually. Okay, so the police get a call of a guy who's outside of a drugstore, pharmacy, kind of a big box retailer. He's got a knife in his left hand and he's got a bat in his right hand. And he's acting crazy. There's some mental health issues going on here. People are afraid of him. He's acting aggressively. He's acting irrational. And there's a lot of fear that he's going to hurt someone. And that's what he's setting himself up to do. So, and this all happens, fairly quickly, but it's pretty obvious to all involved. This person needs to be disarmed and contained. For his own good, for the safety of everybody else around him, they're going to take some action. Okay. So here's what they do.
Hey, watch yourself. Hey, listen to me. Listen to me. Put the knife down.
Okay, pretty obvious. Put the knife down. They start with verbal commands. Okay? I don't know if you caught it, but the first thing the cop said when he pulled up is send some more help, because they can see right away, okay, we're going to want to contain this guy, get as much help here as we can get. There's some things happening off camera here that you can't see. Because he's got a knife, even the bat for that matter, but especially the knife, he's in a position to kill somebody. He hasn't chosen to do it yet, but he's definitely capable of it, and he's a danger of that. So one of the things that's happening is these cops immediately have guns drawn and have their gun out to protect themselves. And what they're waiting for is if he charges them, they're going to shoot him. And they're going to shoot center mass, and they're going to shoot as many times as they need to stop him from making that charge. Because the assumption is he's got a knife, something's going on not right in his head, and he's charging at you, he's going to kill you. So you shoot to stop him. So let's come up to one of those kind of important points. If you can't accept the idea of shooting someone in order to protect your own life or someone else's life, you can't be a cop. So what's happening here is the cops have guns out, and they're ready. If he charges at them, they're going to shoot him. They're going to shoot right in the middle of the target to maximize their chance of hitting him, and they're going to keep shooting until he stops. Fortunately, that doesn't happen. I'll give away the ending here, but let's...
Hey, look at us. Put the damn knife down. Put it down. Just throw it. No. Throw it. Does he have one? Does he have one? I've got one.
Okay, something else that's happening here is, and you may not catch what they're saying, but there's 3 cops here at this point. 2 arrive immediately, another one comes from the right soon after. They're talking to each other about, well, okay, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do? They want to disarm him. They don't want to kill him, but they're certainly ready to defend themselves or anyone else. They want to figure out, okay, what can we do? You may have heard one of them say, do you have one? What they're referring to is something called a non-lethal round. In this case, it's literally a beanbag that gets fired out of a shotgun. It's real high velocity. It won't kill you, but it'll knock you over. So they're saying to each other, let's do that. That seems like a good plan here. We got to get these people out from behind him in case we have to shoot the real gun or the beanbag gun. We don't want them getting hit. So they're going to yell out to get this car out of the way that's in the background. I'm sorry, I'm pointing at my screen, not yours. But you see the car behind him in the drive-thru. And then they're going to shoot him with these beanbags to try to get him to drop the knife and drop the bat or just knock him over. One of them is going to do that. The others are going to have him at gunpoint, ready to defend if need be.
You people in the drive-thru, get out of the drive-thru. Get out of the drive-thru. You ready? Put it down now. Put it. No, I'm not asking you ready. Put it down. Drop the knife. Drop it. Drop the knife. Drop it! Drop the knife! Drop the knife! I'm gonna go after his hand. I want him to turn my way.
That's it. Pretty kind of a happy ending, really, as it all goes. But again, not the most violent, dramatic thing you'll see on YouTube. But it's there and it's worth considering.